When Bernie Sanders was told that anonymous national security officials had reported that his campaign was being assisted by Vladimir Putin, why did Bernie Sanders never challenge that? Why did Bernie Sanders never demand to see actual evidence that this was a real conspiracy? Why did he just accept that at face value? Hello everyone, I've got a 3-part show for you again today. For the first segment, I'm going to focus on Bernie Sanders' political campaign. Did he lose to Joe Biden on purpose? The second story that I'm going to talk to you about will be Major League Baseball's secret plan to salvage the baseball season despite the ongoing coronavirus. Finally, the third part of the show, I'm going to review the movie Bombshell, which is the Roger Ailes Fox News Metoo movie. Now, as I'm sure you've heard, Bernie Sanders ended his political campaign yesterday. Having paid attention to his political campaign, I personally can't help but think, did he lose on purpose? Was Bernie Sanders perhaps controlled opposition this entire time? Did Bernie Sanders lose the presidential primary election on purpose? Now, I don't have any direct evidence of this. All I have is a lot of unanswered questions, and I'm going to list those questions right now. Why, when Bernie Sanders was asked by a news reporter if Joe Biden could beat Donald Trump in the general election, why would Bernie Sanders say yes? Now, you have to imagine there's a certain set of voters that prefer Joe Biden to Bernie Sanders, but are perhaps thinking of voting for Bernie because they think that he has a better chance against Trump. By answering the question the way that he did, Bernie Sanders entirely gave up on these voters. Why would any politician ever do something like this? Why is it that in none of the presidential debates or any speaking appearances did Bernie Sanders never bring up the fact that Joe Biden's senatorial campaigns were financed by the credit card companies? Why was it never brought up that Joe Biden sponsored legislation championed by the credit card companies to make bankruptcy laws much more strict, including the imposition of a means test on the Chapter 7 bankruptcy code? As a candidate running against the quote-unquote millionaires and billionaires, why wasn't this brought up? You would think the fact that millionaires, when they face financial trouble, are able to file under Chapter 11 and keep everything, while working class people are often required to file under a Chapter 13 bankruptcy where they still owe money and they have to give up all their assets, would be a pretty important distinction to draw by a candidate who supposedly is running against the millionaires and billionaires. Yet this was never brought up once during Bernie Sanders' political campaign. Why is it that Bernie Sanders never questioned Joe Biden's mental ability to be president? This is despite the fact that Joe Biden frequently says things that are completely nonsensical.
The case where we cannot let this, we've never allowed any crisis from the Civil War straight through to the pandemic of 17, all the way around 16. We have never let our democracy take second fiddle. We can both have a democracy and elections and at the same time correct the public health.
This was especially bizarre given the fact that Bernie Sanders' opponents put Bernie's health at issue after he had a heart attack. They criticized whether or not he had the physical health necessary to be president. But I guess Joe Biden just gets a pass for some reason? Why did Bernie Sanders never raise the issue of the multitude of sexual impropriety and Metoo allegations that have been alleged against Joe Biden? Especially the allegation that was made very recently that he groped a woman early on in his senatorial career. Bernie Sanders stands out among many of these politicians as someone who has had no Metoo allegations made against him. That means he would have nothing to lose by bringing up these allegations. It's not like he has his own baggage that his opponents can throw in his face. Joe Biden himself said during the Brett Kavanaugh Senate confirmation hearings that the burden of proof should be on the accused, not the woman making the allegation of sexual impropriety. Why didn't Bernie Sanders bring that up and ask that Joe Biden present evidence that he was innocent of some of these allegations? Why is it that Bernie Sanders never brought up the fact that Joe Biden's son was paid millions of dollars to basically do no work for a Ukrainian company, and when a prosecutor was investigating shady stuff that his son was involved in with regard to this company, that Joe Biden bragged that he was able to get that prosecutor fired? If Bernie Sanders is the candidate who's supposed to be standing up to these millionaires and billionaires, then why doesn't he call out millionaires and billionaires involved in shady illegal activity like Joe Biden and Joe Biden's son? Why is it that Bernie Sanders never brought up the fact that Joe Biden used to be a segregationist? Joe Biden began his career in the Democratic Party when the southeastern part of the United States were Democrats, when they supported segregation. And that's what Joe Biden supported along with the majority of the Democratic Party at that time. Even though we're at peak woke culture right now with everyone constantly getting old comments brought up and then the person gets blacklisted, I guess Joe Biden just gets a pass for being a segregationist. Kamala Harris was willing to go after Joe Biden for this. Why has Bernie Sanders never brought any of this up? Why has he never pointed it out? Do you really think that Joe Biden is going to be able to go after Donald Trump as a racist when he used to support segregation? Bernie Sanders was predicted in polls to win big in the Iowa caucuses. However, on the night of the Iowa caucuses, the Democratic Party was unable to report any of the results. That is because a lot of the results were reported through an app that was designed by a company that had received millions of dollars from Pete Buttigieg's political campaign. There was no reason to use this app at the Iowa caucuses, as previously an app developed by the Microsoft Corporation was used, and that app by Microsoft had no problems. When the results were finally released, there were numerous inconsistencies. They also announced that the winner of the Iowa caucuses was Pete Buttigieg. This denied Bernie Sanders a very critical advantage, which would be to be the frontrunner at the beginning of the presidential race. Why did Bernie Sanders never call into an investigation into what happened in Iowa? Why did he never dispute these results? Now, I can understand if this was just a strange fluke. But in the previous presidential election, it was revealed after Bernie Sanders had conceded the primary to Hillary Clinton that the Democratic National Committee had conspired against Bernie Sanders and rigged the election for Hillary Clinton's favor. So when something like Iowa happens, shouldn't Bernie Sanders be bringing this up? Shouldn't he be questioning, hey, maybe this election was rigged? You know, like it was last time, you know, when Hillary Clinton rigged the election against me and then she went on to lose to Donald Trump. Isn't that something that if you were a candidate for office that you would want to bring up? Why did Bernie Sanders never bring this up at any time during any of the debates? When Bernie Sanders was told that anonymous national security officials had reported that his campaign was being assisted by Vladimir Putin, why did Bernie Sanders never challenge that? Why did Bernie Sanders never demand to see actual evidence that this was a real conspiracy? Why did he just accept that at face value? This is especially puzzling that Bernie Sanders would just accept this as face value, given the absolute train wreck that was the Robert Mueller special prosecution. Not only did the Robert Mueller investigation fail to uncover any evidence of Russian collusion, its central premise that Russians interfered in the US election by buying Facebook ads turned out to be unprovable nonsense. Early on in the special prosecutor's investigation, an indictment was obtained against a series of Russian nationals. These were all people working for a troll farm that posted Facebook advertisements that were supposedly meant to influence the US election. Now, one of the first videos I ever posted to this YouTube channel talked about that indictment, and I indicated that this was basically a sham indictment, that Robert Mueller would indict all of these Russians, and since all of them live in Russia and weren't going to be extradited to the United States, that therefore he was able to claim that the Justice Department could prove this conspiracy without actually having to do so in court. I also indicated that what would be interesting to see is whether the indictment would stand if any of the Russians came from Russia to the United States and asked to be prosecuted under the indictment. Well, guess what? That actually happened. One of the Russian companies on the indictment agreed to cooperate with the courts and prosecution and allowed Robert Mueller's prosecution team to proceed with a criminal case against them. 2 weeks before the case was supposed to go to jury trial, the Robert Mueller special prosecutor team dismissed the case entirely. The foundation underneath the entire Russia investigation was complete bullshit. Yet Bernie Sanders just accepts uncritically that anonymous national security officials have said that his campaign is being assisted by Russia. Why is it that 2 days before the Super Tuesday primaries, Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar drop out of the race? Why couldn't they just wait 2 days to see what happened on Super Tuesday? This is especially baffling in regards to Pete Buttigieg. He had won the Iowa caucus and he had done very well in the other states. Why on earth would he drop out of the race at that time? Also confusing is why, just a couple weeks later, is Pete Buttigieg given the opportunity to guest host the Jimmy Kimmel Show. Does anyone think that it's weird that someone who's a potential frontrunner would drop out of an election 2 days beforehand? And does anyone not think that it's really strange it's just a little bit of time after that this politician is then guest hosting a late night talk show? I don't know, it all seems real strange to me, like maybe there's some seedy backdoor deals going on that nobody knows about. But you wouldn't think that listening to Bernie Sanders. According to him, everything's always on the up and up. He's being treated completely fairly by everyone. No one's doing anything sneaky or underhanded. So did Bernie Sanders lose on purpose? I don't know. Like I said earlier, I just have a lot of questions. All right, the next thing I wanted to talk about is Major League Baseball's plan to survive the coronavirus. Now, it's pretty rare that I'm going to be talking about sports on this YouTube channel. The only other time that I've talked about sports on this channel was when I criticized Megan Rapinoe for some of the ridiculous gender politics stuff that she was saying a while back. But anyways, there is apparently a secret Major League Baseball plan to potentially move all of the baseball teams to Arizona and to have the entire baseball season play out in the Metro Phoenix area. I guess Arizona is where they do all of the spring training, so there's a lot of baseball fields they can use. If they end up going forward with this plan, all of the games will have no audience. It'll just be the teams there. But I guess the advantage would be, unlike the regular baseball season, they wouldn't have to be flying these players around all over the place, having them, stay at hotels temporarily. It would reduce their contact with other people. Now, obviously, the teams would still have contact with themselves, although normally a baseball team is pretty spread out. When you're running the bases, you're going to be next to other players, and if they are infected, then you're going to get infected. So I don't know that this would be a perfect solution, and it's not final yet. So I don't know if this would be a perfect solution, and so far Major League Baseball hasn't decided concretely whether they're going to do this or not. One thing that would be interesting is if Major League Baseball does end up deciding to do this, as the baseball season continues, eventually in Phoenix during the summertime, it gets incredibly hot. I'm talking they'll be doing outdoor baseball games in 110-degree heat. Given the fact that all the other sports are canceled though, and the Summer Olympics is delayed indefinitely at this point, it would be nice to have at least one sport still ongoing. The idea of baseball games with nobody in the stands is kind of depressing though. My own personal belief is that the reason that baseball used to be America's pastime and most favorite sport, but was eventually surpassed by American football, is the fact that baseball games are very entertaining to watch in person. They don't translate nearly as well watching them on the television screen. While I feel like football is kind of the opposite, it's actually a lot easier to keep track of what's going on watching a football game from the TV than it is if you're in the football stadium. Anyways, I don't have anything more to say on that. I just thought it was interesting, so I brought it up. I know it has nothing to do with politics. Maybe that's refreshing to you. I don't know. Maybe you're wondering why on earth is he talking about this. Anyways, the third thing I wanted to talk about is a movie review of the movie Bombshell. Now, why in the hell did I watch this movie? That's a good question. Right now, due to the coronavirus and everyone being stuck at home, I think a lot of people, myself included, are running out of things to do, and potentially we're going to watch movies that we wouldn't otherwise normally watch. So I ended up watching Bombshell. This is the movie that documents the sexual harassment allegations that were made against Roger Ailes when he ran the Fox News channel. To the extent that this movie was supposed to make me more sympathetic to the Metoo movement, and specifically to the women of Fox News, it did not do so on either count. The sexual harassment that's depicted in this movie is, in my view, pretty minor and not overly concerning. For example, in the movie, Roger Ailes never really makes any serious sexual advances towards any of the women. For example, in the movie, Roger Ailes never makes any serious sexual advances towards any of the female characters. Now, Roger Ailes does make vague statements such as if they prove their loyalty to him, then that could help their career. But none of the female characters in the movie ever do anything sexual with Roger Ailes. One thing that the movie does show is that Roger Ailes often requires the female reporters to show their legs to him, and he makes them spin around. He justifies doing this, however, on the theory that he wants the female Fox News host to have sex appeal, that would help boost the ratings of the news network. As he states in the movie, Fox News is selling a visual product. Having attractive female news hosts showing off their legs during the news is something that potentially will boost ratings. Now, I have a hard time disagreeing with Roger Ailes when he says this, or concluding that this is sexual harassment. In certain types of media, having physically attractive people is going to boost the desirability of that product. It's going to boost the ratings. For example, when people watch professional wrestling, they expect to see big, beefy, muscled up guys doing the wrestling. No one would take it seriously if some guy sued the WWF for gender discrimination because they gave him a hard time about not working out enough. Now, I understand the news is different from something like wrestling because it's not just entertainment, it's also in the public interest. And I can see how women can find that there's a double standard when it comes to the sex appeal of men and women. But I don't think this is an example of our society being hypocritical. I think there's just a difference between sex appeal among men and women. Male sexuality is very simplistic. Men are attracted to women who are young and attractive. That's pretty much it. Female sexuality is a lot more complicated, and it's cyclical. When women are menstruating, they're attracted to very masculine men. A man who looks like a professional wrestler is going to be more attractive to a woman during this period of time. However, the majority of time when women aren't menstruating, they're attracted more towards a type of man who has a lot of resources, a lot of ability to care for the woman and any potential offspring she may have with the man. So the type of man that's going to be most attractive to women majority of the time is going to be a middle-aged man in a business suit. That's why most news networks, you'll see that the male newscasters are usually middle-aged men in business suits, and the female newscasters are young, attractive women, often showing off their legs. This isn't sexual harassment, this isn't misogyny, it's just how human sexuality works. Now, all this being said, do I feel bad for Roger Ailes? Absolutely not. I believe Roger Ailes is a piece of shit who got what he deserved. And I say that because in the movie, what ends up happening is, even though, in my view, he doesn't really do anything all that bad at Fox News, after Gretchen Carlson sues Roger Ailes for sexual harassment, a lot of women, and I mean a lot, a substantial number of an amount that cannot be discounted, come forward and allege sexual harassment against Roger Ailes. And it's all for stuff that happened before he worked for Fox News. And unlike what's depicted as happening at Fox News in the movie, the stuff that he's accused of doing prior to him getting the job at Fox News is disgusting sexual harassment that absolutely fits the definition. So overall, my view of Roger Ailes after watching this movie is, yeah, he probably was kind of a sexual predator. He probably did harass women, but he probably did most of the bad things prior to him working at Fox News. By the time he was at Fox News, he was probably just too fat and old to really keep up with it anymore. And although he retained some of the creepiness, it doesn't appear, at least from what the movie shows, that he was really doing any hardcore sexual harassing at Fox News. A couple other things that I would note about this movie is they put in cameos for all of the different Fox News hosts and various other people. And none of these cameos are necessary, really, or drive the plot forward. And with some of them, the actors they have playing the host just look absolutely nothing like the real Fox News host. And if you're going to do a cameo in a movie like this, where it's just a completely pointless cameo, and the person doesn't even look like the person they're trying to portray, then why is it even in the movie? You might as well take it out. I mean, some of them are fine, like the guy who is supposed to be Bill O'Reilly does look like Bill O'Reilly. I think Geraldo Rivera makes an appearance and he looks fine. But then there's some of them that are just bizarre. Like, for example, there's a Sean Hannity cameo where the actor playing Sean Hannity looks nothing like him whatsoever. There's a point where Rudy Giuliani makes a cameo in the movie and the actor looks absolutely nothing like him. There's also a Chris Wallace cameo where the person just doesn't look like him at all. I don't understand the point of these cameos when you can't even tell who the person is supposed to be. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, the main actresses do look very convincing. It's crazy how much Charlize Theron looks exactly like Megyn Kelly in this movie. So would I recommend this movie? Not really. I didn't find it all that interesting. I think that there's other examples of alleged sexual harassment that would make for more interesting movies than this. I mean, if you're really bored and there's nothing else to watch, I mean, sure, this movie's fine. Like, it didn't offend me or anything, but I can't really say that I'd recommend it. Anyways, that's all I have to say about that movie. I hope you enjoyed this video. Since I've got more free time on my hands with the pandemic, I'm going to try and do a new video each weekday if I'm able to. So stay tuned to this channel, subscribe if you're not subscribed, and thanks for watching.